When most people think of Hale Irwin, they picture a steady, reliable golfer. A guy who quietly won a few events, stayed out of trouble, and went about his business. But that image? It's one of the biggest misconceptions in golf history. Because Hale Irwin wasn't just consistent, he was a champion hiding in plain sight. And while the spotlight was over guys like Jack Nicklaus, Tom Watson, and Arnold Palmer, Hale Irwin quietly built a resume that should have made him a household name. This is the story of how a soft-spoken man with no scandals, no drama, and barely any flash outlasted almost all of them. How he won more on the senior tour than nearly anyone in history. How he conquered the US Open not once, not twice, but 3 separate times. And how he did it all without the world realizing just how dominant he really was. Let's rewind to where it all began. Hale Irwin was born on June 3, 1945, in Joplin, Missouri. But it was in the small town of Baxter Springs, Kansas, where the seeds of his golf greatness were planted. On the local municipal course, Hale and his father spent hours practicing on sand greens. He picked up a club at just 4 years old, and by the time he was 14, he'd already broken 70. That kind of dedication wasn't a phase, it was a pattern. The Irwin family eventually moved to Boulder, Colorado, and that's where Hale's athletic story really took shape. At Boulder High School, he starred in not just one, but 3 sports. Yes, golf, football, and baseball. And as a senior quarterback, he led his football team to a state championship. That performance earned him a football scholarship to the University of Colorado. There, Irwin made a name for himself in 2 sports, as a tough, standout safety on the football field and a rising talent in golf. In 1967, he captured the NCAA Individual Golf Championship, cementing his place among the top amateurs in the country. He graduated that same year and made the decision to turn pro in 1968. There was no hype, no grand expectations from him. He was just another guy, or so they thought. In the early 70s, Irwin found his footing. In 1971, he picked up his first PGA Tour win, then another, and another. But it was 1974 that changed everything. The US Open at Winged Foot. The course was brutal. It didn't test just your swing, it tested your sanity. No wonder that year's US Open was nicknamed the Massacre at Winged Foot. The course setup was merciless. Greens were unplayably fast. Rough was knee-deep, fairways as tight as hallways. During the tournament, 44 players shot 80 or higher. Only 8 rounds went under par, and even top pros were collapsing under the pressure. Hale Irwin won with +7, one of the highest winning scores in US Open history. It was a statement win. But Irwin didn't celebrate like he'd made history. He shook hands, signed the scorecard, and quietly moved on. That would become his trademark. Just keep showing up and crushing it. 5 years later, Irwin returned to the US Open stage, this time at Inverness, and once again proved he could outlast the best. The field was stacked with legends: Jack Nicklaus, Gary Player, Tom Weiskopf. But Irwin didn't flinch. He played with the same patience and precision that had become his signature trait and walked away with his second US Open title. That win didn't just make him a 2-time US Open champion, it cemented him as a player who could rise above the game's giants without ever demanding the spotlight. By this point, Irwin also had almost a dozen tour wins, but most fans still thought of him as a steady pro, not a standout star. And that's what made him so elusive and so dangerous. While the world was dazzled by the charisma and camera angles of other golf stars, Irwin built his legacy 1 brick, 1 round, 1 win at a time. But his most unbelievable moment was still ahead of him. In the years between 1979 and 1990, Irwin continued adding PGA Tour wins, refining his already razor-sharp game and showing flashes of brilliance at some of golf's toughest stops. He didn't win another major during that stretch, but he stayed in the game year after year. By 1990, Irwin was 45 years old. Most golfers at that age are preparing for retirement. But Hale? He was preparing to make history. At Medina, in one of the most dramatic U.S. Opens ever, Irwin forced a playoff with Mike Donald. And after draining a 45-foot birdie on the 72nd hole, he did something no one expected. He ran across the green, pumping his fist, beaming with joy. It was the most emotion anyone had ever seen from him. And why not? He'd just become the oldest U.S. Open champion in history. But, believe it or not, the biggest chapter of his career was still to come. And it would rewrite everything we thought we knew about aging athletes. When Hale Irwin turned 50, most assumed he'd quietly fade into the senior ranks, play a few events, collect a few nice finishes, maybe win a tournament or two. What happened instead was a takeover. Irwin didn't just compete on the Champions Tour, he owned it. He won 45 events on the senior circuit. Let me say that again, 45. That number stood untouched for decades until Bernhard Langer finally matched and eventually surpassed it. Between 1995 and 1998 alone, Irwin won 20 times. It's safe to say that he played like a surgeon, precise, efficient, unrelenting. Every swing looked like it belonged in a textbook. Every round felt like a lesson. To the few who were paying attention, it was obvious. This wasn't just a good player aging gracefully. This was one of the most dominant golfers ever on any tour. So why didn't Hale Irwin ever become a mainstream icon? He is rarely mentioned in the same breath as iconic names like Jack Nicklaus, Arnold Palmer, or Tiger Woods. Hale Irwin wasn't flashy. He didn't have a signature swing or a catchy nickname. He didn't frequently appear in major endorsements or TV interviews. Even his senior tour dominance came at a time when the golf spotlight was shifting toward younger stars like Tiger Woods. And that's probably why he never got the attention his record deserved. While others turned to the spotlight, Irwin simply showed up, played his game, and kept winning year after year. He didn't generate headlines other than for his game, and he quietly built one of the most consistent and decorated careers in golf. For some reason, that just didn't capture the public imagination the way a big personality or dramatic collapse might have. He wasn't overlooked because he wasn't great. He was overlooked because he made greatness look routine.